Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Today we are taking a deep dive into the hidden costs and, well, the systemic vulnerabilities that get exposed when global systems are pushed to their breaking point.
And that could be anything, economic, political, even technological.
Exactly. We've got 7 sources that really highlight where that pressure is building, and we're going to start with a huge geopolitical flashpoint, Iran. So Iran is facing what our sources are calling a profound economic rupture. And this has translated directly into civic unrest.
And it seems to have a very specific starting point.
It does. The crisis really crystallized on December 28, 2025. That's when a historically powerful group, the Tehran merchants, the Bazari, staged this completely unprecedented protest.
And that's the key word, unprecedented. So what was the tipping point? What pushed this normally conservative, often pro-regime group into open defiance?
It was the currency collapse. The numbers are just, well, they're staggering.
We're talking about the real, the national currency, collapsing to a market rate of 1.45 million to the dollar.
1.45 million. And you have to compare that to the official government rate,
Which is only about 42,000. So the market rate is nearly 35 times lower.
Wow. So if you're a merchant, what does that actually mean for your business?
It means that importing essential goods, we're talking rice, sugar, oil,
Yeah.
and then selling them at the government's fixed prices is, well, it's completely impossible. The model just doesn't work.
Okay, so you have this core economic issue starting with these really influential merchants, but it didn't stop there.
No, it quickly expanded. It pulled in unemployed youth, frustrated, low-paid employees, and it morphed into this much wider anti-government movement.
But the authorities, they have a method for dealing with this kind of thing, right? A kind of playbook.
They absolutely do. It's a 4-stage playbook they've been perfecting since 1979. We saw it in 2009, 2019, 2022.
So what are the stages?
Stage 1 is always stern police action, just to suppress the initial shock.
Right.
Stage 2 is this good cop, bad cop routine. Some officials warn about foreign plots, others offer some token concessions.
And we're currently in stage 3, is that right?
That's right. Stage 3 is attrition. They let the protests slowly run out of steam while holding these huge pro-government rallies to change the narrative.
And those concessions you mentioned, are they offering any real relief?
Barely. It's
Yeah.
very token. We're talking about a handout of 10 million reals a month.
Which is what, about $7?
$7 US.
Yeah.
It's a Band-Aid. But what really stands out here isn't just the protest. It's who is protesting. The Bazari strike is huge.
Why is it so significant?
Because these merchants were the ones whose withdrawal of support essentially doomed the Shah back in 1979. Their participation today, it just exposes a really deep systemic vulnerability.
And it suggests the economic pressure isn't only coming from U.S. sanctions.
Precisely. While the maximum pressure sanctions have absolutely squeezed the economy, this Bazari group has also been pushed to the margins at home.
How so?
They're being muscled out of the most lucrative sectors by the Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, and the Bonyads.
And the Bonyads are those massive quasi-state charitable foundations.
Exactly. And they operate with total impunity. They get state-controlled imports, tax exemptions. A traditional merchant just can't compete.
So the ruling elite can contain the protests for now, but they seem to lack the tools to fix the root cause.
They do, because the root cause is the diversion of all these scarce resources into the nuclear and missile programs, which then triggers the sanctions in the first place.
And that's what's fueling the social angst.
Especially for the 2/3 of Iranians who were born after the revolution. They see the corruption, they see the wealth in Gulf Arab states, and they hold their leadership responsible.
So what are the stakes here for a country like India?
Well, there are a few key dimensions. First, Gulf stability is critical for India's diaspora, for oil supplies, remittance flows. Second, India strategically needs Iran for access to Afghanistan and Central Asia. That's a huge long-term trade goal.
And there's a domestic angle too, isn't there?
There is. With an estimated 25 million Shia citizens in India, stability in Iran is seen as a vital consideration for both domestic and foreign policy.
That's a really complex crisis. And, if we're talking about the immense resource use in a geopolitical system, maybe we should apply that same thinking to our most resource-intensive new technology, artificial intelligence.
It's a great transition because we often hear about how AI can help fight climate change.
Right, but what about its own environmental footprint? We found some research suggesting its computational appetite is creating this massive hidden carbon cost.
It's a huge blind spot. The global ICT industry, information and communications technology, is already responsible for up to, what, 3.9% of global greenhouse gas emissions?
And AI just dramatically escalates that. Let's put this into perspective, because the numbers they're pretty stark.
Go on.
Training just one sophisticated large language model can generate 300,000 kilograms of carbon emissions.
And to make that tangible for people, that's like,
It's equivalent to the total lifetime emissions of 5 cars.
wow. And that's just for the training.
Exactly. Once it's deployed, usage adds up incredibly fast. One study says a single ChatGPT request uses 10 times more energy than a standard Google search,
And it's not just energy. There's the water usage.
which is something I think most people don't even consider.
No, but these servers could be using up to 6.6 billion cubic meters of water globally by 2027. That's a huge strain on water resources, especially near data centers.
So this raises a big policy question, particularly for India, where the public conversation is almost entirely on AI's benefits. How do we close this environmental policy gap?
We have to start by acknowledging that developing these large algorithms has a real, concrete environmental cost. The sources propose extending the scope of the mandatory environmental impact assessment.
The EIA notification from 2006.
Yes, extending it to explicitly include AI development projects. We just need to start measuring this stuff, which means we need transparency.
So the idea is that disclosure requirements would actually influence how these models are built, or if they're built.
Absolutely. We should mandate disclosure of the impact GHG, energy, water use, as part of ESG standards, environmental, social, and governance. The EU is already moving in this direction.
And what are the practical solutions?
The key sustainable practices are, 1, using pre-trained models whenever you can instead of building new ones from scratch, and 2, and this is crucial, powering these data centers with verifiable, renewable resources.
Okay, from the resources used by tech to the resources used in food. Let's shift to a topic that challenges our culinary status quo.
Yeah.
Eating insects, entomophagy.
Right, and our sources detail this fascinating stall in Bengaluru where the common assumption from people was that this must be some kind of foreign food trend.
Which is a huge cultural disconnect, right?
Yeah.
Because eating insects has been a traditional practice in India for a long time.
A very long time, especially in states like Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. But as soon as it enters the urban sort of aspirational conversation, you immediately get the yuck factor.
Yeah, I did notice the taste feedback was surprisingly specific, though. Someone described silkworm as tasting like overcooked kidney beans or eggy.
Mm-hmm. And the cricket had more flavor.
It suggests that if you can get past that psychological barrier, the culinary appeal is actually there.
It is. But it's the sustainability argument that ultimately needs to win people over. I mean, insects are a vastly superior source of protein and micronutrients.
How much more superior are we talking?
About 80% of their body mass is edible. Compare that to about 55% for poultry. And they require significantly less land, less water, and far, far less feed than livestock.
The sustainability argument is strong, but I have to ask, isn't labeling this sustainable just a new way of making traditional practices cool for the urban elite? Does it ignore the real economic barriers to scaling this up?
That is a critical point. Urbanization has created this cultural distance. In cities, entomophagy gets framed as indigenous or rural, maybe even backward.
So it doesn't fit with modern aspirational food ideas.
Exactly. It gets dismissed because our ideas of progress and class are shaping what we consider acceptable to eat. It's a classic disconnect between how the urban middle class views traditional rural practices.
So how do we get over that barrier?
Well, low-pressure public experiments, like those food stalls, are vital. And presenting insects in processed forms, like grinding them into flour for cookies, that helps a lot.
It lowers the immediate shock of seeing a whole insect.
It does. But for true mass acceptance, you need industrial standardization. Labs like Atree's IBC are working on standardizing the rearing protocols.
To ensure safety and consistency.
Safety, consistency, and producing them at scale. And importantly, that takes the economic pressure off of wild populations.
Okay, shifting gears now from food to digital security. Let's look at this controversy around reports that the Indian government was considering demanding smartphone source code. First, let's establish, why is source code so fiercely guarded?
Right. So source code is it's the complete blueprint for a piece of software, the inner workings of the operating system.
And it's kept secret for commercial reasons, obviously. It's intellectual property.
It is, but the primary reason is security. If a malicious attacker can see the complete internal structure, it just massively amplifies the risk of them finding and exploiting weaknesses.
And the alleged demands were incredibly intrusive. disclosing the secret source code to third-party testers, notifying the government before software updates.
It's catastrophic from a security perspective. Attackers usually exploit vulnerabilities they can see from the outside. Forcing a company to expose its entire code base is essentially inviting exploitation.
And this happened right after that other controversy with the DOT ordering the pre-installation of the Sanchar Sathi spam app.
Which itself raised huge snooping and security concerns among rights groups.
So even though the government has now sort of downplayed the source code demand, why is the pushback from digital rights groups still so strong?
It's about bureaucratic history and a lack of transparency. In 2023, the National Center for Communications Security finalized something called the Indian Telecom Security Assurance Requirement, or ITSAR. And while the responsibility for this is now shifting to the IT ministry, groups like the Internet Freedom Foundation are pointing out that those ITSAR documents are still public, and the whole consultation process was not transparent.
They want it all out in the open.
They're demanding the immediate release of the current draft for public scrutiny. They're arguing that consultation can't just be limited to closed-door meetings with big tech.
That lack of transparency is really the key concern. All right, let's pivot now from digital space to physical geography, specifically India's urbanization model. We always focus on megacities, but the sources are saying we should be looking at the smaller towns.
That's right, towns with populations under 100,000. Of India's nearly 9,000 towns, the vast majority are these small towns. They are the real frontier of India's urban future.
And why is that shift happening?
Simply because the megacities ran into what the sources call overaccumulation problems. Infrastructure is stretched to its limit, costs are unbearable, land prices are inflated.
So capital moves to where it's cheaper.
Exactly. These small towns are emerging under capitalist stress, cheaper land, more pliable labor, and critically weaker regulation.
They're becoming logistics hubs and service centers, but is the quality of life actually improving for the people moving there?
The sources argue. This shift is leading to what they call the urbanization of rural poverty.
What does that look like on the ground?
It looks like informal labor dominating everything: construction, the platform economy. New hierarchies are hardening, controlled by real estate brokers and microfinanciers. And the core problem is that policy has failed them.
How so?
Flagship urban missions like Emernud are described as deeply metrocentric.
Metrocentric. What does that mean in practical terms for a small town?
It means the funding formulas prioritize population size and existing infrastructure. So these smaller towns are automatically sidelined from any meaningful, large-scale investment.
And the consequence of that is?
It's profound. It leads to tanker economies, where communities rely entirely on private water trucks because there's no municipal supply, and, of course, indiscriminate groundwater mining.
So the way forward needs a fundamental political shift in focus.
Exactly. It needs political recognition, empowering these chronically underfunded municipalities, and integrating planning for housing, livelihoods, and ecology. And you have to regulate the platform economies to ensure basic labor rights.
Okay, let's cross the globe now to look at an unprecedented political siege happening in the U.S. facing the Federal Reserve.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell recently went public about a Justice Department probe into him personally over a renovation project,
Which he called a pretext to gain political influence. That's a huge escalation.
It's a massive escalation. It puts the independence of the world's most powerful central bank openly on the line.
And that independence is considered a bedrock of U.S. economic policy.
It is. It allows interest rate decisions to be made for long-run stability, free from short-term political interference. And foreign officials are already expressing concern that the U.S. itself will be the one to suffer the most if that erodes.
The market reaction to this was immediate and pretty volatile.
Yes. The market playbook for an attack on Fed independence played out exactly as you'd predict. The dollar had its largest daily fall in 3 weeks. Gold shot to a record high.
And Treasury yields rose.
Long-dated U.S. Treasury yields rose sharply. And this reaction highlights the real risk here. Leaning on the Fed could erode the dollar's safe haven role.
Could you explain that safe haven role for our listener, the exorbitant privilege?
Right. It refers to the dollar's status as the world's primary reserve currency. It allows the U.S. to borrow money very cheaply because everyone trusts the dollar.
So if political interference undermines that trust,
Then you could trigger a sharp rise in bond yields, which increases borrowing costs across the entire American economy.
and Powell's term ends in May, the future is looking uncertain.
Very uncertain. President Trump has promised a successor committed to lower interest rates. So a view is emerging that the technocratic Fed, as we've known it for decades, is fading from view. This could change everything. Rates, the balance sheet, banking regulation.
Finally, let's wrap up with some geopolitics in the Arctic. We've seen these really high-profile claims from President Trump that he needed to uh, take Greenland to stop it from falling into Beijing's hands.
And he claims there were Chinese destroyers all over the place.
What's the reality there?
Analysts confirm that's just nonsense. China is a very small Arctic player. There is zero sign of any military activity in or around Greenland.
So what are China's real ambitions there?
They're fundamentally economic. They're centered around their Polar Silk Road initiative, launched in 2018. The goal is to make China a polar great power by 2030, mostly through investments in Russian energy and European infrastructure.
But have they had any success in Greenland itself?
No, they faced significant setbacks. They failed in bids to build an airport and buy an old naval station. When it comes to Greenland's valuable rare earth reserves, Chinese-linked mining efforts were halted.
Why was that?
One was stopped in 2021 over environmental concerns, and another deposit was sold to a New York firm in 2024 after some successful U.S. lobbying. The diplomatic costs for Beijing have been high.
And the central security claim, the one about Chinese ships near Greenland, that doesn't even make geographical sense, does it?
Not at all. The key trade route China is actually developing is the northern sea route along Russia's coast. That's their priority.
Because it shortens the journey to Europe.
By half compared to the Suez Canal. Greenland is completely irrelevant to that supply chain. The actual security threat is incredibly hard to identify, meaning the political posturing is just far, far greater than the reality.
We've explored how the pursuit of different versions of progress, economic stability in Iran, digital efficiency via AI, or the growth of small towns is fraught with unseen costs. How do we reconcile the undeniable human need for resources, like sustainable protein via entomophagy, with the economic and cultural barriers that prevent us from embracing solutions that challenge our definitions of what is modern and what is acceptable? Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.